host today, Derek Havens, and joining me as always is Mr. Steve Balscherry. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. On today's episode, we'll be talking about the barn burner that was the Patriots' loss, unfortunately, in Germany, 10-6 at the hands of the Indianapolis Colts. We'll be talking about a couple of things regarding the team and talk about where they go from here. It is the bye week, so we have this week, next week, kind of do a little digest. We do have a Red Zone Sunday, which I'll get into later, which I very much enjoy. But at the same time, before we get into all that, I have to do what we always do to start the show. Steve, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. A little crazy, but we're doing good here. If you tuned into Sunday's game in Frankfurt, wishing for a similar type of game that we saw for many years between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, I think you'd be sorely disappointed. 16 points in the entire game. You might see that in 3 minutes in a Brady Manning game. So,
right.
It's kind of what we predicted. I mean, I thought they'd score a few more points, but I didn't expect them to win this game, so it wasn't really even a surprise that they did lose. But the fact that they were only able to score 6 points against Indy speaks volumes of where this offense is. I thought the defense held them in. They gave them a couple of opportunities to win the game, and similar to what we've seen all year, it's just this team is sinking fast, and I don't know that we'll see any kind of turnaround.
But right, it's tough. I mean, it is tough, and they're in a weird spot, a spot that we're not accustomed to, seeing them. I know that they've struggled the last couple of years. This is a different situation. We talked about this on the phone. I want to say on either Monday or Tuesday, that we've said over the years, the Patriots aren't going to be, a 4-win team under Bill. They'll win 7-8 games. They might not be a contender, but they'll still be good enough to do that. They won't have a top 3 pick. And here we are with a legitimate chance at them getting one of the top picks in this upcoming draft, which I think is good news in some ways, but it's a conversation for maybe later in the show. Okay. So I want to stay focused. Before I give you my Colts take, I just want to go ahead and ask people to please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, like, share, leave us a review. It keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. And as we recap this game against the Colts, Steve, it's a tough situation. I thought they started with the run early and then totally disappeared from it. They totally went away from it in the middle of the game. And then they started going back to it towards the end and had some success. It just was a little too late at that point. And on the flip side, I thought they were very good against the run defensively. I thought early Indianapolis had a couple of nice runs. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, with the lone touchdown in the game, as he can be dangerous. But I thought that the Patriots did a very good job against the run, and one of the few good things they actually did in this game. But the offensive line was a big tipping point for both teams. Gardner Minshew had a lot of time in the pocket, and he did his kind of best Fitz magic impression where he was kind of danced around in the pocket. I mean, that Josh Downs third and or 26-yard or 28-yard pass was just a total backbreaker. But, Mac Jones was under siege a lot. I've seen a lot of people talk about the offensive line being, not being, Mac created a lot of the issues. The offensive line's been better. The offensive line has been better in the last couple of weeks. I did not think they were particularly good in this game. And again, I think it's a hand washes hand situation, Steve. And I want to ask you this. I think this is one of the biggest issues on the team right now. And I don't understand why some Patriots fans, I don't want to classify everybody, why some people think it's just like a one or the other thing. I think you can have a bad offensive line and you can have a quarterback that contributes to that by creating some of his own pressure. I think this game is a perfect microcosm of that situation, Steve.
Yeah. And, the offensive line was terrible, I thought, in pass protection. But it doesn't absolve Mac Jones, as we both know, of his own personal struggles completely. The offensive line contributed to that, but Mac also contributed to his own, issues. But, bottom line, he was pressured on more than 51% of his dropbacks. That's far too many. Now, did he contribute to some of that? Yes. But I mean, when your offensive line isn't holding up like that, that's really tough.
Well, I think I give you a perfect example of both situations. I think there was a play. It was a third down play. I think in the first half that City So just got absolutely just one of his worst pass refs. Who, by the way, has done a really good job in the run game. He did great in the run game with Mike and Wenyu, especially in this game. Pass game is still where he's developing, Stephen. Hopefully, we see him kind of take that year 2 jump from that perspective. Again, story for another day. But if and when you is retained by the team and stays at right tackle, which I think would be the best scenario, so could be a really good right guard in the shape of kind of a Mike and when you hear it. But I do think his pass protection needs some work. But third down early in the game, so gets beat cleanly right up the middle. Mac had no chance. Go fast forward to later in the game where we finally saw Bill O'Brien, aka Teapot, flip his lid a little bit. And I think he was so hot because Mac had 3 options on the play, and he kind of created the pressure in his mind and wasn't able to make a decision quick enough. And I think if he was, on his game there's actually a touchdown available. I think that's why Bill O'Brien was so hot. I think that's kind of represented why a lot of Patriots fans feel frustrated with him at times. But
and there's frustration
that's what I'm
all
talking
around.
about.
But there was frustration all around. You could see it. And O'Brien did light up. But we've seen that before. He's done that to Tom Brady. So it's not like it's,
I do think it's funny, though, because we have been kind of waiting for it.
Yeah. Well, he's been very patient with him because he knows, the kid's confidence is pretty much shot and he just lost it, which he was entirely in the right there. I mean, regardless of what's going on around him, your quarterback has to step up when the opportunity is there, and he didn't. But, it's just, like you said, it's a microcosm of the season. It's usually one or the other. Sunday happened to be both. I didn't think the offensive line played well at all. Jones was hit far too many times. He was pressured. And as we talked about, early in the season when all this was first starting, this is how young quarterbacks get ruined. And I think, bottom line is, I don't know whether they plan on keeping him next year when they break in a new quarterback, because we know they're going to go after a new quarterback. But I think he would be best served by going somewhere else and starting with a clean slate with another new system and coaches. Because, I mean, his confidence, you could see it.
Oh, man, that press conference was hard to watch.
It was brutal. I felt bad
for him. On a human level, I feel for him. I mean, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, we know he's a professional. He's getting paid a lot of money.
Exactly.
And I get all
only
that.
Only 32 jobs for a reason, at his position,
But at the same time, as a human, like you said, you felt bad for the kid because you could see.
Well, we know it's not an effort issue. We know it's not. I don't think anyone questions whether Mac is putting in the time, putting in the work, and you could see it on the bench towards the end of the game. He took his lumps, and to his credit, he dapped up Bailey Zappi on the sidelines, and he said after the game that he's been in the situation on both sides, and he wanted to he wanted the team to win. He knows the guys want to win, and he says all the right things. I mean, I think some people get annoyed because he kind of says a lot of the same things. Well, that's unfortunately because he's making a lot of the same mistakes, and the team is making a lot of the same mistakes. So they sound repetitive because they're being repetitive. Unfortunately, not in a good way. And I like you said, I just feel for him. I mean, I do. I do think he was. I do think he was done dirty by the team. Ultimately, I don't think they've handled him the way they should have handled him. I don't know if he was ever good enough to get to where they ultimately needed or wanted him to go. But obviously, you're seeing someone that is so broken from a mental standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint. He's just not in a good situation, Steve. And I think to your point, he needs to go to a team where he can sit behind a veteran and just kind of reset. And I do think that you could get him back to being a serviceable level quarterback at some point, whether he's a franchise guy or not. I don't know, but I think right here, it felt like, I don't know if he'll start another game. I assume he will start, but I think what you saw was the official kind of last nail in the coffin of his Patriots career this last Sunday, Steve. I really felt like almost everybody kind of was like, including him, including the fans who were holding on for Mac dear life, Steve. I really felt like that Sunday, that going to Bailey Zappi, it felt like that's kind of the end of his time here in New England.
Yeah, I feel like that too. And again, I mean, you look at the big picture of things, and they didn't do right by him in a bunch of different aspects, especially putting the players around him that he needed to succeed. Because I think
we knew it from the beginning.
Yeah, and I thought, we knew that the players weren't great at wide receiver, but we were both thinking that with the 2 tight ends, now they have 3, and the running game, that it would make those wide receivers better. But the offensive line struggles kind of took away the running game, although, as you said earlier, they ran the ball very well on Sunday. But those games have been few and far between this year. And, and then to lose some of their top players, it was just a snowball effect. And as we all know, quarterbacks often get too much, praise when teams win, and they often get the lion's share of the blame when teams lose. And that's what's happening right now. But you can see the difference. I mean, he is struggling mentally. That interception at the end, I mean, it was right there.
One of his worst passes, if not the worst pass of his career.
He short
and one of the worst passes I've ever seen really any starting quarterback make. I mean, it was just bad.
He just short-armed it, and the reason is he's so tentative now, and
he's so gun shy
because that was right there.
I've heard a couple different people, again, because the game was a couple of days ago, and we wanted to do the show yesterday like we normally do, but it didn't work out for scheduling reasons. And I've heard a couple different analysts in the area talk about use the same terminology, and I think it's a perfect example. Is he just used the wrong club out of his bag? He thought he needed a 6, he used a 9. You know what I mean? And he just kind of it just didn't have enough on it. I mean, it just is frustrating, Steve, because I do think this team can be better than what they've shown. But
other than 2 games, they've had opportunities to win
all of them. Yep,
every one of them.
So they're 2-8.
About that,
they're 2-8, and 6. So 6 of those 10 games, 6 of those games, 6 of those 8 games, they have had an opportunity to, to be, to win the game at the end. It's frustrating. And Todd writes in, right off his back foot. Yeah, totally agree, Todd. I mean, it was. And that's been the falling back thing has been his issue for going on like a year now.
But even off the back foot, it wasn't a long pass. He didn't put anything on it. He short on that throw.
Yep.
And
it was almost like he was about to throw it, and then thought at the last second he wasn't going to throw it. Like he decided he wasn't going to, and then it just came out of his arm anyway. I know that's not exactly what happened, but I think you know what I mean. Like he started his throwing motion like, oh, I got somebody, and then he freaked himself out. And that's the gun shy thing. That's the thing that unfortunately is, it's just again repetitive stuff by everybody on the team. And I thought, again, I think there's issues all over the place. I mean, the nice thing for, I guess one of the nicer stories has been Demario Douglas kind of developing. And, this is your 6th round rookie out of Liberty who just got 9 targets in a game. I love the little stat. How did you feel about let me ask you about the last play at half, the stat patter screen, they called it. for him instead of just taking a kind of heaving it into the end zone. What did you think about that?
I think they were just being cautious with it, and they just took a shot. And maybe he can make something happen.
Yeah, it seems like I know this. We've talked about Bill's coaching style for a long time, and he does usually play more conservative because he feels. I don't want to speak for him, but I think you would agree with this. I think Bill feels like if you stay conservative and you don't beat yourselves and you keep it close enough, eventually your opponent will beat themselves in some capacity more often than not. If you're a tough football team, a fundamentally sound football team, and you don't make mistakes, you will have the other team beat himself. And that's how I feel like he still coaches now.
Yeah,
And I think the difference is that they need to be a little bit more aggressive because I know he doesn't coach like this and he probably won't, but they have nothing to lose at this point. You know what I mean? And it's just like, so throw it up, and the sideline photo, there was a couple of good sideline photos and clips from this game, but of Bill just kind of like rubbing his face, and he just looked so defeated. Because I think he feels like a similar way that we all feel, and that the team feels that, man, we just can't get out of our own way.
Yeah, and like you said, if you're a tough, sound and fundamentally good football team, well, 2 or 3 of those aren't true anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're still a tough team, but they're not fundamentally sound, and they make the same mistakes over and over. And it's not just Mac Jones; it's across the board.
Right.
And I think that speaks to the coaching. I think they're coaching these guys not to lose rather than to go out and win.
Yeah, and we've seen that. We've seen that a few times. I do want to make a note. I don't think they'll let him go, and it's a little early for this. I know it's midway through the season and stuff, but if Michael Pittman hits the market, that's a player I'd circle for the Patriots as a player that I would be interested in. I know this is not really recapping the Colts. It's more I'm sitting there doing some pro scouting on Sundays now because I'm just looking at what the team is going to do, and I'm looking again. The Colts I don't think are a bad team. They're an okay team. I think with Anthony Richardson, they could be a good team, and I don't think they're going to let their 26-year-old 1,000-yard free agent receiver or soon to be free agent receiver hit the market. But if he does, I would be interested in him. A lot of people throw out T. Higgins. I think Michael Pittman, you probably could get a similar type of player. In my mind, I think Pittman's a pretty damn good player and not totally break the bank, but
a
little bit of a story from another day.
Excuse me.
Oh, geez.
I choked on my own word. When I look at Michael Pittman, maybe this is rubbing salt in the wound, but he reminds me of what they wanted to get in Parker.
Sure. Yeah,
big physical
he's your
guy
prototypical X receiver, and he's efficient, and you've seen this over the years with a lot of different good receivers. He's putting up the same numbers no matter who the quarterback is, which you always look at as a great sign. You saw DeAndre Hopkins do that for a lot of years. You saw Larry Fitzgerald do that. He had Kurt Warner for some years, but if you run through the gamut of who he had after that, it was, not great. So, I think you see, and again, I'm not necessarily comparing the player, but the type of player who puts up production with limited quarterback play. So again, I just thought he's just someone who I have my eye on. If he hits the market, I would love the team to be interested in him. We're going to talk about the Jack Jones situation. I wanted to have an open conversation about Mac Jones and what's next for the team. Before we do those 3 things, Steve, any other final thought coming out of this game?
No.
It's really not a lot to talk about.
And the sad thing was, as you know, you and I talked offline, I couldn't watch the game live because
Yeah.
I was driving up to South Carolina to attend a funeral for an old buddy of mine. So I couldn't catch it on Sirius XM, but I had my phone like, on the dash, and it kept putting live updates on, and I'm watching the score, and I'm all this while I'm driving, and I'm like, this looks horrible. And after the game was over, I was like, do I really want to rewatch this? And yeah, it wasn't any better than expectations. I knew what I was going to see, but it was pretty terrible.
Right. It's a it was a tough it's a tough game to watch. It's a tough product to watch. And I think that even getting to ownership too. Robert Kraft. I know the Kraft family was really upset about this loss. I've heard it relayed from a couple different media members, a couple people who work for the team. Yeah, he's been wanting to get the Patriots over in Germany for a long time now. The Patriots have a lot of fan clubs in Germany. By the way, the crowd was awesome. I want to give a shout out to the crowd. It was terrific. So hats off to anybody who was in attendance. It was awesome. I thought it was great. But Kraft spoke to the locker room, before the game, and you could just see it. I know the viral clip going around with him kind of hanging his head. There's been a little pushback by a few different people who said that because he was sitting there where he was sitting, it's not like normal stadiums. He was looking down at like a video board or looking down at his phone. I don't know. It just didn't. The optics, I don't know what it is. I'm going to just Felger this situation and just make it however I want to make it. He looked the exact way that I feel like 90% of Patriots fans felt like watching just the end of that game, just like just so defeated.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what actually was happening, but I'm gonna just go ahead and take that round with it, Steve.
Yeah. And to Chris's question, I didn't do a report card this week because I was still on the road.
I was going to say, Chris just wrote in asking about your report card.
Yeah, so I didn't get the opportunity to do that. It had nothing to do with the game per se. I was like 10 hours up the road, and when I normally post that, I was in the middle of driving home. So
well, just play it out really quick. I mean, would this be, in your mind, do you think this would be one of the worst games?
For the offense, yes, but defensively, I mean, they held the Colts to 10 points, so it's really hard to ding the defense too hard, because if you hold anyone to 10 points and it's not a weather event, then you should win the game 99 times out of 100.
Do you think you should? I know we've been, and this is not just like a media created story, because at some point you have to feel like if you're a defensive player on the Patriots, you're getting frustrated. Do you think that we're starting to get to that boiling point, Steve, where, I think the team has rallied around Mac, despite what people think, for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying it's just Mac. Okay. I'm not just saying it's just a quarterback thing, but do you think the defensive players are just looking at the offense like, come on, guys, like you can't even put up 11 points. Like we're doing everything we can right now.
Exactly. And I'm sure there's a lot of frustration. I'm also sure, we don't know this, but that the team is keeping it in-house up to this point, because how could you not at this point,
I mean, if it starts getting out, if more things start coming out, it's really, signs are really not looking good. I mean, Andrew Callahan, came out with a report yesterday saying that Mac Jones has kind of lost the locker room at this point. I think he said something along the effect of 80% of the locker room. Where he got that number, I don't know. I'm not discrediting the report or Andrew at all. I'm just saying,
it was weird that they had that breakdown.
Yeah, 80%. I mean, did we get a tally?
But,
But to his point, I'm being a sarcastic dick. But to his point, and to his report, for taking his word for it, if assuming what he's reporting is true, which I have no reason to believe it's not, I would just say it just, you have to feel like there was that breaking point Sunday, Steve, with what happened.
And you're starting to see that with some offensive players as well, because it was just a comment in passing, but I think Zeke Elliott's comment, hey, we need to start running the ball more. And I totally agree with that. they were running the ball well, as you mentioned right at the outset of the show. Then they stopped, and I'm like, why? I knew how the game turned out, but when watching it after the fact, why aren't they running the football?
And they haven't been giving Stevenson. I don't know if he was just working through something physically or what, but they haven't been giving Stevenson as much until the last few weeks. Kind of, gaining some momentum here, and Rich Eisen and who was Rich Eisen? Who was the other play-by-play? Yeah, Rich Eisen and who? Oh yeah, Jason McCourty.
Jason McCourty, yeah.
Who Jason McCourty was. I think Rich Eisen is a phenomenal studio host. I think as what he was doing, on the TV broadcast, I would say, but I think I've loved watching Rich forever. I mean, he's great, but I do think he just brings it didn't seem like he was as prepared as someone like Jason McCourty, who I thought was very good, for the most part. Especially someone who's so new to it.
Right.
But anyway, long story short, they were talking about how Mac Jones said he wanted to run the ball more. And they start running. It was like they came out and said, "Hey, we're going to run the ball and set a tone." And then Bill was like, "Okay, now that we've set the tone, now we can just drop back and throw it 20 times at the quarterback who has no confidence, and then we'll go back to the run game and at the end and see if it works out." And by the way, I heard. I want to say I think it was the Zoe and Bertrand show. Early in the week, kind of making fun of Mac Jones because, if you can imagine, because he said that he wanted to run the ball. And they're like, when have you ever heard a quarterback saying that they want to run the ball? And I was like, I'm pretty sure I can remember Tom Brady talking about how important it is to run the ball at times, but I just thought it was an annoying example of, you can twist things however you want to.
Exactly.
Tom Brady says they want to run the ball, and they can be like, look at this unselfish player. He wants to set the tone. He knows how important complimentary football is. And then Mac Jones says it, and they go, what kind of baby doesn't want to throw the ball? It shows how he's got a lack of confidence. He's not the guy. What kind of quarterback who's not going to be the guy? You can make it however you want to be. And I'm going on a slight Russ Goldman-ish tangent here, but it still was just a perfect, in a vacuum picture of how you can play it on both sides of the street.
Exactly.
It's just frustrating. And I think it shows you where they're kind of at with Mac. Anyway.
Speaking of that, with Tom Brady saying they want to run the football. I remember, when they picked up Corey Dillon during the 2004 season, how they were so good at running the football. I think Corey Dillon had over 1,600 yards. And I remember there was one particular game where Dillon just took over, and they were just running the ball down someone's throat. I can't remember the opponent offhand, but there was a clip of Brady coming off the field to Charlie Weiss, and he had a big smile on his face, and he was mock acting like he was upset. Are we ever going to throw the football again? But I remember that because when you said that, it brought back that memory, because when you're running the ball like that, you control the game, and, it opens up all other aspects for you. But again, you can take a comment and make it fit any narrative you want, for the most part. But there's always a second side to the story. And I agree with Mac Jones. I mean, you have Elliott, you have Stevenson. They should be running the football more.
I agree, especially when your offensive line is struggling, and a lot of them are better suited in the run game than the pass game anyway. But
to answer Chris's question, at this point in the season, do you think any of the coaching staff are on the hot seat? I think every one of them is.
I think they're all warm.
Yeah,
I think they're all warm
because
I do not think. Let's take a break and then pick this up on the other side, because I do. We can start with the Bill Belichick thing, because I do think there's this is getting more legitimate as it goes. I do not think this is any longer a sports radio topic. I do think this is a legitimate conversation, but we'll just take a quick break for podcast purposes, and we will be back right after this. All right, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Again, Derek Haven, Steve Balichieri, as we just spent the first half the show talking about the Colts game and kind of where the team's at. But Chris, who's listening to the show for a long time, had a comment talking about, at this point of the season, do you think any of the coaching staff are on the hot seat? And Steve, look, I mean, you're starting to hear more and more rumblings about what, will Bill be fired? Will, some people threw out if he was going to be let go, mid-season, which I never bought into. Could he be traded? The Commanders have been thrown out. The Chargers, the Bears, the Giants. I've heard, a lot of teams in that, Dallas has been thrown out there a couple of times if the bottom falls out. I think you're starting to hear more and more people, whether it's local reporters, national reporters, analysts like Dan Orlovsky talked about on the Pat McAfee show the other day, talking about how he's heard where like his potential destination could already be, I just think there's a lot of back channeling stuff going on, Steve. And I do think it's a legitimate. I do think Bill Belichick's seat is legitimately warm, and I wonder what the Krafts will do, because look, I think you can say a lot of things about the Kraft family and whatever you want. Everyone has their own opinion. I don't think you can really argue that they care about the team. They very much care about this team. And I do think it will be a hard situation to have, Steve, but do you think that Bill, let me just flat out ask, is Bill going to be the head coach next year in your mind?
If the season ended today, I would say no.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that there's a way that he could end up staying. And I think it's a tough situation too, because, what do they do? Like if Bill came to them and was like, Robert, look, I know the season hasn't gone well. But I really want another year. I want to be able to fix this. Like if he goes to them and like really talks it out like that, it's going to be hard to separate the business from the personal when you've had such a relationship with this person for a long time. And on the flip side of that, if you're Robert Kraft, you have to be feeling like you went to the top of the top from a dynasty standpoint for a long time. Your franchise went from a lower middle franchise to one of the highest, what would you call it? Like, a franchise that's worth some of the, one of the highest in the league, from a value standpoint, like a team valuation standpoint, it's one of the highest in the league. You're now slowly being, I don't want to call it a laughing stock, but this is the type of organization, and what we've seen from this team the last couple of years is what we've made fun of over the years as Patriots fans, teams that have kind of put themselves in bad positions. So I feel like Kraft is not going to want to settle for something like that. I think he's going to want to turn the page, but how the season ends could very much dictate the situation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not saying they're going to go on a run, but if they play better and they're, winning a few games here and there, Belichick could try to convince Kraft that, hey, we went to the lowest of lows, but we turned the corner, and we just need to get players healthy, blah 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 blah. My feeling for the coaching staff as a whole is, would some of them remain if the Patriots in fact do hire Gerard Mayo, because he'd be more apt to keep some of the guys that are already in the building around.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they go outside the organization and completely clean house, and I think almost all of those guys will be gone.
I do think, I do think there are some good coaches on the staff. I'm not saying there's not. Like, I think DeMarcus Covington, Gerard Mayo seem like very good coaches. And there's a couple others I'd throw in the mix. I'm starting to have real questions about someone like Troy Brown, which hurts my heart to say, but we've been talking about it for a little while. And I'm just looking at the entire offensive part and just say, this is just not working on like almost any level. Like it's just really kind of fallen behind. I think I've kind of been leaning towards this for a long time. And again, this is probably a topic for closer towards the end of the season and into the off season. But I do think more and more that we really need like a whole organizational kind of clean house flip situation. And that's not to discredit Bill for any of his accomplishments, or doesn't say anything about, I think I'd love to have someone like Gerard Mayo lead the team. I just think that where they're at right now and where the league is, they'd be better off just totally making a clean break from everything, going outside the organization, hiring a GM, hiring a coach, and from a different organization, and kind of starting fresh, Steve. I think they desperately need it, because right now, I don't want to say it's a toxic situation, but it's kind of getting really murky. I mean, and now you're starting to get the reports coming out about whether who leaked it, about Bill's, offseason extension. And then there's, from the other side, there's a lot of smoke about, will Bill be fired? I just think you're starting to get these media leaks. And that to me kind of shows that the situation is not as good as I think some people are whistling past the graveyard on this a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Todd's question, minus the D, do you see a rebuild past a few years? It all depends on how well they draft in next year.
I've been
Because we saw with Houston.
So long,
I mean, I'm going to Houston here. Look at where they were about a year and a half ago and where they're at now. And it can happen that fast if you put the right pieces in place.
Over the last couple of years, they've put a ton of assets into their offensive line. Okay. They hired a former defensive player. It's very similar. D'Amico Ryans and the Gerard Mayo situation are very, very, very similar. So if you're going to tell me that Gerard Mayo was going to take over the Patriots, I think that he could get the team going in the same direction as D'Amico Ryans. I'm not discrediting what D'Amico's done and saying that Gerard could definitely do it. I can just see similarities, as former players, good locker room guys, smart guys who can command a room. I just see some overlap there. D'Amico went out and he hired, is it Ben Slowick, I want to say, or it's either Slovic or Slowick, who was the OC now, who came from the Shanahan style offense. And he's now taken their second overall pick quarterback, and he's got him just on another level. I mean, CJ Stroud's playing great football right now. And so you can see something there. You can see, hey, Nick Caserio's made some good, has made a couple, I'm sure there's a couple decisions he regrets. I'm not sure he cares for how Derek Stingley's played out over Sauce Gardner, but I think there's a lot of good players that he's picked, and he's put some pieces in place there where they seem like they're going on the right direction. And so for me, you could talk me into it. My biggest issue, and I've said this 100 times, so I'm a little bit of a broken record here, is if you hire someone like Gerard Mayo to be next, your offensive coordinator could potentially be poached, and it really kind of screws up your system. Like if Ben Slowick for the Texans gets poached now, CJ Stroud in year 2 is going to be facing the same situation that Mac Jones is, where he's changing another coordinator in his second year. Man, that's a tough way to live. And I'm not saying that CJ Stroud would necessarily fall on his face the way Mac did, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help your young quarterback when that happens. I mean, look at how Josh Allen has struggled without Brian Daboll. They just fired Ken Dorsey after that performance.
Yeah, and to Dorsey, I mean, I thought with the players Buffalo has, that their offense was very vanilla with Ken Dorsey. I thought we'd see all kinds of different stuff, utilizing Allen and some of their skill position players, because that's an offense that should be a lot better than it has been this year. But back to New England, I'm looking at, they have to hire the right offensive coordinator, whether that is Bill O'Brien or somebody else, I don't know. But, like you said, if they're going to clean house and bring in, a young guy that's going to build something up and is more in tune with today's game. I mean, not to say the Patriots style couldn't win, but they definitely need a lot better players. And again, that starts with the GM. They have to totally upgrade this offense. Not saying they need to replace everybody. They have some good pieces on the offense. I think, I'd try to re-sign Hunter Henry, probably Ezekiel Elliott, depending on what he wants next year. And, keep some of their younger offensive linemen, but
Yeah, I mean, I would try to sign Stevenson to an extension this offseason. I know some people don't like the running back second contract thing. I think if you can sign him to a 3-year deal, and I'm sure like most NFL contracts, it's usually the first 2 years where you owe money, and the third year is as good as as good as nothing. But I still would like to keep some of these guys around. I mean, they need to, Steve, identify. It's all about these last few games, in my opinion, is you have week 11 and then you have 7 games left. So you have to identify who's moving forward. And it's hard because now you're in a situation where you don't even know if the front office or the coaches are going to be the ones identifying this, but you need to figure something out. And you got to figure out who some of these guys are. Like, to me, let's get into this. Last week we said that J.C. Jackson, or I said at least, I didn't think J.C. Jackson was going to be back with the team. He didn't travel with the team to Frankfurt, Germany. He didn't play. It seems like he's going to be back. He was back at practice. He seems like he's going to be back with the team. Someone like Jack Jones, who was benched again to start the game, apparently didn't get his attitude where they thought he was, and they flat out just released him earlier this week. I thought for sure when I saw the Jack Jones, that was waived, I thought for sure J.C. Jackson was next. I was just waiting for it. I just thought they were just going to kind of clean house. And the Jack Jones situation is frustrating, but it kind of goes back to this. Like, he was the talent. He was never like a first round talent, but he was a very talented player that went where he went in the draft because of some of the off the field issues, and some people were worried about his attitude. And I think a lot of people, Steve, think that Jack Jones, because of how his career started last year with games against the Packers and the Lions, where he had some plays, they look at it as he was playing really well. He really hasn't played all that well. And so I think that this is a situation where the team was like, your level of play and what you're bringing from an attitude standpoint is just not worth it. And I don't think they thought he was worth the trouble, and they decided to move on.
Yeah, and again, I agree with that. I mean, you look at Jones, and the reason he went, where he did in the draft, it had nothing to do with his ability. It had to do with his off-field stuff. And, the Patriots, they gave him a shot. They put him out there. He showed what he's capable of doing. I mean, last year, that pick 6 against Aaron Rodgers, some other plays he made, you could see there's definitely something there. Not saying he was going to be elite or anything like that, but at the same time, you could see he could be a very good player. But, and then again, how does he repay the team for showing faith in him and giving him a shot? He has that airport incident last year. The team stuck by him again, and then he comes back and he's really not playing well, and then the attitude to boot. Now, he claims he wasn't late for a curfew. Normally, I'd say that maybe there's room for doubt in that, but that was reported by Mike Reese. Mm-hmm. So I'm not buying what he said.
Take it as gospel.
Exactly.
It's a frustrating situation with Jack too, because again, it's not like the team doesn't need cornerbacks. I mean, I think you're going to be going into the offseason where cornerback is yet again another need. I mean, as many holes in this roster are, but with Christian Gonzalez and John Jones and Marcus Jones and Miles Bryant, and I know people don't love the Miles Bryant situation, but he's going to be one of the back end DBs on this team. He just, as long as Bill's here. So I still, it would be Jack Jones had a perfect situation in his hands to get on the field and get some playing time, and they could use the outside quarterback help. But I think Bill had to make a statement, as Todd said in the comment section. They had to make a statement. And I don't know what to think of the J.C. Jackson situation, Steve, aside from the fact that because he's still here, I can only make the leap that Jack Jones didn't correct his attitude, and maybe J.C. Jackson did, and maybe that's the difference. I don't know, but I can't really justify why he would still be here and Jack Jones isn't, other than just that.
Well, we'll know next week, won't we?
Yeah,
because this week obviously they're on the bye, and I think it comes at a really good time for them strictly from the injury standpoint, because this team is so banged up right now that they really need, a week to heal up as best they can. But we'll know next week. I mean, think about it. If J.C. Jackson doesn't start the game next week, that'll tell you all you need to know about where he's at and what's
Sure.
up with him. But
I do want to go back to something we talked about too with the Mac Jones situation. What does the team do coming out of the bye, Steve? I mean, what would you do? I'm not asking you what Bill would do or what Bill is going to do. We don't know what he's going to do. So don't think like Bill, think like Steve. Who do you start at quarterback coming out of the bye?
That's a tough question again, because
I did kind of throw it to you out of left field. So,
well, here's the deal: we both know how limited Greer and Bailey Zappi are.
mm-hmm.
So if you sit Jones down, which he probably really needs to sit down, just because he mentally needs a break.
Yeah.
But if you start those guys and they fail miserably mid-game,
can you go back to Mac then?
And then you go back to him, I mean, you're just going to crush his confidence even more, I think. And the interesting thing is, before they took their time off to go to the bye week, Mac took all the number one reps in practice. Not saying that's the end all be all, but they haven't changed anything yet.
So let's play out this situation though. Do you think there's any value in finding out pretty confidently what you have in Zappi and Greer? Like, do you look at it and say, look, we're going to start Bailey Zappi coming out of the bye. Let's give him 2-3 games. If he performs well, we'll write him out. If he doesn't perform well, we'll turn over to Will Greer for the final 4 games and see. Because in Bill's mind, let's say that all this coaching stuff is total BS. Okay, that him and Robert have talked and they're going to make some changes, but Bill's still going to be here. Don't you think you don't need just a new quarterback, Steve? You also need to have a backup quarterback too. So isn't there some value in knowing if Zappi's worth keeping around or if Greer is someone who could stay in the system and be that? Because I'm not a big rookie quarterback backup situation. Like, I want a veteran behind a young quarterback. And Will Greer's been in the league now a little bit. So couldn't you potentially kind of talk yourself into, at least I'm kind of doing it now, isn't there some value in knowing what you have in Will Greer as a potential backup, if you're going to change the quarterback next year?
Well, I think they already know, because Greer's been around for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just really think, I think they know what they have in Zappi, and I think he'll be gone next year. Depending on how they decide to address the quarterback situation, whether they sign a veteran, whoever that may be, or they go with it in the draft. It's Mac Jones is still on a rookie contract, and I could definitely see a situation where they keep him around as the backup, and potentially move on from him next year. Now that's just me spitballing it, but
yeah. And Todd writes in, saying to me, no, because Bill is coaching for his job, still trying to win games. And I agree with that too. I mean, I think that if you want to just say, look, Bill has seen all these reps from Will Greer and Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones in practice, in game, whatever. If he still thinks that Mac Jones, despite how broken and dysfunctional the whole situation is, if he still thinks Mac Jones is the best quarterback, he's probably going to play Mac Jones and just ride him until the end of the season, right, Steve?
Yeah, I think so.
I think we're playing both sides of the coin, but I think what we're doing is probably honestly what a lot of the coaching staff has been doing over the last few weeks, talking about the situation, because I don't think that Bill would do this. I don't think he would do this, but I do think Bill appreciates a lot of the vested veterans on the team. And I don't think it's I don't think, again, I don't think he did this, but I don't think it's totally out of the realm of possibility that he sat down with some of the team captains, some of the guys in the locker room, and just said, like, just had a conversation with him, because I think he knows how fragile this situation could be. I'm not saying that he did it in front of the entire team, but it wouldn't totally surprise me if he sat down with some of these veteran players and on the team, and some of these veterans that he are captains and people that he trusts, and just been like, the Slaters, the Andrews, the Dietrich Wises. Like, do you think he could have sat down and just been like, what do we need to do in order to kind of keep the peace here in the locker room as we kind of manage these waters? Because it is kind of, a unique situation for this franchise to be right where they're at right now, Steve.
Yeah, and I'm sure Bill has done that because he respects those guys. And as much as people think it's a dictatorship there, it's really not. He's always been open to suggestion, especially from his veteran players. And I think that if they had any faith in those other two backup quarterbacks, that they'd have been in there by now. I really do. I mean, this isn't something that just propped up. This has been going on for several weeks. So I really think that if they really had any confidence in those other two guys, they'd have been in there by now. So, I mean, anything, all bets are on the table at this point. And I'm sure that internally the coaching staff probably has sat down by now, because Bill always talks about self-scouting. Where do we go from here at this point? What do we do? And, how is everything going to get at least a little bit better? And again, we'll know when they come back from the bye next week, because we'll see if Mac Jones has taken all the first team reps at practice, he's going to be the starter again against the Giants.
Yeah, I think he probably is. It's just hard. It's just such a tough situation to go ahead and pull him for the last series. And it put Bailey in a terrible position. But again, that I get it. It is part of the gig, being the backup quarterback, to be ready to go at any minute. But it was a weird situation. It was a statement, and I get that. But man, it's just, I'll be fascinated to see how Bill navigates coming out the other side, because it is really unique. And we're gonna go ahead and give our predictions. Since the Patriots aren't playing, we're gonna pick 3 games. I have a couple games in mind, Steve, that we'll pick here in just a second. But quickly, we're now in a situation. We're now in a situation here, 2-8, where it's a unique situation. Now, Steve and I mentioned this off air, online or offline the other day on the phone. It is impossible for me to watch the team play and want them to lose. That being said, Steve, it is getting more and more it's looking more and more like they're going to be picking in the top 5. I think that's looking like a pretty strong possibility. And I know the team's not going to tank, so I'm not talking about it from a coaching or team perspective. But I would be curious for those who are listening live and for those who are listening later to reach out and let me know what you want, because I understand the conflict. It's tough because the first game for the Patriots coming out of this game is for the Giants, and whoever loses that game, in my mind, is probably the biggest winner. And I know that's a really weird mentality to have, but you really, at this point, you really want the best. I think everybody wants the team to have the best outcome. I think the team is looking at a multi-year rebuild. In order to do that, we're talking about a clean house situation at quarterback, throughout the roster, through maybe the coaching staff to maybe the front office. I don't know where they're going to be, but what I do know is you're starting to watch things a little bit differently. Like that Kyler Murray comeback for the Cardinals helped the Patriots, and now you're in this situation where we're actually watching other teams. We're wanting the Bears and the Panthers and the Cardinals and the Giants to win games. And that's a weird situation, Steve. And I can tell by the look on your face, you have no interest in entertaining this conversation.
No, it's
weird.
It is weird. And you find yourself conflicted because, like you said, you don't ever root for your team to lose. But at the same time, if they continue to lose, then you're rooting for these other, you know, bottom tier franchises right now to
Mm-hmm.
win. So, because if you're going to lose, then you want to have the best options sitting in front of you, and it is a weird situation, and we haven't had thoughts like this in a very long time.
No, I could never. I mean, I'm only 33, so it's different, but I can't. I've never been in a situation for the Patriots that I've wanted them to not win games. And again, I'm not saying I don't. I'm not sitting here and being like, oh, I hope they lose.
No,
But I do think that if this game was in Foxborough coming up and not the Meadowlands, and you might even hear it anyway, you could hear some sarcasm cheering if the other team scores. Like if the Patriots score, it wouldn't surprise me if you heard a couple of the Giants fans doing some sarcastic jeers, Steve. It just wouldn't shock me.
right. And I'll never root for them to lose, but at the same time, if they continue to keep losing, I'll be looking at some of those other teams and
Right.
hope they're winning. So the fact that their draft situation gets better.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sitting here saying I'm
No,
wanting the team to lose. Okay, I'm not. But I do think we've officially, and you kind of did it this week, Steve. I think we've officially reached that point in the season where now you're just kind of scoreboard watching other teams too, because I mean, I just think it ultimately a better draft pick helps them. Okay. And even if you don't want the Patriots to lose, you certainly would like the other really bad teams to win as many as you can. So it doesn't hurt you if they do. Again, ultimately, I've said the same thing for years now. I don't really even care about, I want the team to do well, but I care more about seeing the young players play well than I do about ultimately the score, which has been why some of this last couple of years has been so frustrating because it seems like they were putting off this inevitable full blown rebuild until the last possible moment. Now the wheels have kind of totally fallen off, which again, it's probably a conversation for another day. Let's go ahead and switch over to games of the week, Steve, because we're pressing up against the hour. It's noon Eastern, and I gotta head out here soon. So let's start with tonight's game. A really good Thursday night game. Bengals at Ravens, 6:15. I don't have the spread in front of me, so I'll pull it up while you go ahead and give your prediction here. Who do you think wins tonight?
After last week, I just see the Ravens winning this one, especially at home. I just have that feeling they're gonna beat Burrow and the Bengals tonight because it is at home. Maybe in Cincinnati, I would lean the other way. I think it like all
Ravens are
those
-3.5. Just so
yeah.
you know.
Like all those other AFC North games, it'll probably be very physical and close. So I'm taking Baltimore tonight.
I was thinking about and I'm going to take Baltimore because T. Higgins out, but I do think the Bengals are trying to figure some stuff out. I was shocked they lost last week. Good win for the Texans, really good win. Baltimore, I was ready to put them right in that top contender tier, but they worry me a little bit, but the AFC is just an absolute bloodbath right now. I mean, we're halfway through the season and it's quite literally pretty much anybody's ball game outside of pretty much the Patriots. So aside from the Patriots and probably the Jets, anybody can pretty much go from here. But I just look at it and I kind of wonder, who's going to come out of this game. I do think that there's some serious playoff implications with this game, Steve, given the Steelers and the Browns, who are both in the mix, but now Browns, with the news that Deshaun Watson's going to be out for the rest of the season. And don't you just love when bad things happen to bad people? But that certainly mixes up that division a little bit here too. So I'm going to take the Ravens as well, Steve. The other game I want to look at, and we'll look at the Monday night game too, because that is a doozy here. Chargers at Packers, Steve. We got them on Sunday in the morning slot. The Packers, to me, are a team that draws a lot of similarities to the Patriots in terms of, I think the defense is pretty good. They've been banged up a little bit, some offensive line issues, and a young quarterback with a lot of questions. I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to lose his job, but there's been some rumblings that they need to see more. I doubt it. I don't even think Jordan Love will lose his starting job. I think they'll go into next season with one more year to see if Jordan Love can figure it out. On the flip side, the Chargers are a team that I think, going back to our earlier conversation, Bill could be perfect for what they need, because I don't think they have a head coach that's really maximizing what they need out of what the players. I don't think the players for the Chargers are getting what they need out of Brandon Staley. Okay, so I'm kind of curious about these two teams for different situations. Who do you like and why, Steve?
I just like the Chargers in this one, and
Chargers are 3-point favorites, by the way, in Green Bay.
Yeah, but again, that's a team that always tries to find a way to pull defeat out of the jaws of victory, and but I just don't think Green Bay's that good of a team right now. But nobody gets more free passes than Justin Herbert, because they come up short in a lot of these games, and the finger gets pointed everywhere but him. But at the same time, I just don't think Green Bay's that good of a team right now. So I'm going to go with the Chargers on that one, even though they're on the road.
Yeah, I agree. The Chargers, I still think just have a little bit too much, but they're dysfunctional, Steve. And there's a lot of questions with them. There's a lot of talent there, but
talking about Bill, I just don't see Bill going there. Bill's not a West Coast guy. I'm not.
I just want to see him in the powder blue hoodie.
Yeah, I mean, he'd wear a hoodie in out there indoors when it's like 80 degrees. But I don't see Bill as a LA guy.
I don't see him as an LA guy, but I see the situation as being tremendous for him.
Yep.
And Josh McDaniels, bring him right with them. Well, they'll both they can share a house, a little beach condo.
Then they'll be wearing Hawaiian shirts out there.
Yeah, exactly. Last game I want to get to is the Monday night game, which honestly looks really, really interesting. We have the Eagles in Kansas City against the Chiefs. The Chiefs are favored by 3, Steve. Who do you like and why?
That's a tough one. Winning on the road in Kansas City, as we all know, is a very tough thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles have the bodies up front to disrupt Kansas City, and they have the bodies up front. Kansas City's defense is very good this year, but I just have the feeling they have the ability to run the football. And whereas Philly could make Kansas City a little more one-dimensional, I'm going to go with the upset here with Philly over KC on the road.
Yeah, I thought I was going to lone wolf this one. I'm actually doing the same. I think that the Chiefs are having a little bit of a reset year in terms of some of the guys around Patrick. I think Patrick's been tremendous in terms of just his play. I mean, you don't have to like him, but you can respect the talent. And when him and Travis Kelce are on, that's a tough combo to beat. And I think that defensively, the Chiefs will be competitive in this game. Kansas City, we know Arrowhead's going to be rocking. I just look at the Eagles top to bottom, and I think they're a more talented team, and I think they're better in the trenches. And I think that we've seen kind of an epidemic of terrible offensive line play around the NFL this year, and the Eagles do not fall into that category. They're really tough up front. I think that the Eagles get this done, and I think it's a good game, though. And this is obviously a potential Super Bowl preview game. I know people don't want to see a repeat, but it's certainly a conversation in the conversation. But this is probably the game I'm looking forward to most. Just two high caliber teams kind of going toe to toe.
Yep, and it should be a good one.
Yeah, I agree. Final thoughts, Steve, as we wrap up.
No, it's been a crazy week. Again, there's more questions than answers with New England, and I think we're going to be in that mode for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Every week we're going to be looking at, what's the next shoe to drop?
Exactly. I mean, right now the Patriots are opened up against the Giants next week at 5.5-point favorites in the Meadowlands, which shows you where the Giants are.
I mean,
So
does that mean they're going to score 6 points?
I guess
Or more?
it's gonna be 9-3. The over under in the game. I have no idea what it is. I didn't look at it, but the over under in that game's got to be like 27.5. It's gonna be low.
The over under is going to be real low in this one.
Oh yeah, and I'd still take it. I don't care what they said.
I find it hard to believe that somebody's going to say the Patriots are favored by 5.5 points.
That was what DraftKings said a second ago when I was looking at it. I was just curious. But for me, my final thought is obviously it stinks when your team's not playing, but I do think the exciting thing about either your team on a bye or if your team is on a primetime game is that you get to have like an NFL Red Zone Sunday where you get to really kind of dive into all the games, Steve, and just flip around and check things out. I mean, I really personally, I know they're going to go to an 18-game schedule eventually, and if they do that, I really want them to have 2 bye weeks. I think it will benefit the players, and I think you can kind of spread it out because I think the product in the NFL, Steve, and we'll talk about this towards the end of the year. I think so far, halfway through the year, the NFL product has been, I would say, average at best. I don't think it's been as good as it recent years. And there's been a lot of injuries and a lot of things that go into that for me. Less in practice time, things like that, less contact early, I think is actually doing them more harm than good. But aside from that, Red Zone Sunday, I'm looking forward to it. So again, for Steve Dallas, I'm Derek Cavins. Thanks again for everyone who listened to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2, sticking with us through these dark times. We will get you through it. I do want to mention we are going to do a mailbag next week. I haven't even told Steve that yet. I want to try to get some questions in before we preview the Giants game. So I'll shoot it out on Twitter. If you have questions, Twitter, Facebook, reach out. Let's try to get some questions, and we'll go through it next week and try to have a little therapy session for all of us in Patriot Station right now. Please, again, subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. And we will see you guys next week.